Welcome to Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Unfortunately, I like to start Mondays happy and festive, but we have tragic news as usual. Okay, Anna, take it away.
We begin with that tragic news from the weekend.
Officials say that Peyton Gendron, a white 18-year-old man, was wearing body armor and military-style clothing when he pulled up yesterday at the Tops Friendly Market and began shooting. He picked that spot specifically for its demographics, according to officials. They say he drove for more than 200 miles away to carry out the attack in an area that had a significant black population.
10 people were killed and 2 others injured after an 18-year-old racially motivated mass shooter opened fire at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. Now, the total number of people shot was 13, and 11 of those 13 people were black. And I say that it was a racist shooter because after he was identified, there was news of his so-called manifesto. And I read all 180 pages, and it's not vague. It doesn't hint at racism. The manifesto makes it abundantly clear that this 18-year-old shooter specifically targeted a supermarket 200 miles away, knowing full well that this was a predominantly black area, and opened fire with the specific purpose of shooting and killing black individuals. In fact, he streamed this horrific and tragic shooting on Twitch before Twitch took it down. And in the video, you can see him pointing the gun at a white man who's like cowering down in fear. He apologizes to that man and then continues the massacre. So he was very clearly targeting black people. His manifesto makes it clear that that was his intent. And we have a lot more details to get to, including the weapon he used and how he illegally modified it. But Cenk, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in.
Yeah, so we have to clarify things that are super obvious because everything is debated in America and everything is turned into lies. So the guy writes a 180-page manifesto about racism and countdown to the right wing saying, no, he wasn't racist. No, it's not a big deal. Yes, everyone should have these kind of weapons. Yes, that's called freedom. Yes, the idea of great replacement theory is also freedom, and that is, and no, it's not racist. No, the great replacement theory, which is what he believed in, is that white people are going to be replaced by non-white people. It is by definition racist. So, by the way, if that were to quote unquote happen, what would be the harm if everyone is equal? No, they think white people are superior and from time to time should murder black people. And that's what happened in Buffalo.
Not time to time. I mean, his ideology, along with the ideology of other white supremacists who subscribe to, the conspiracy theory of white replacement, they want to essentially purge the country of all non-whites. Deport people, murder people, whatever it takes to essentially establish a white ethno-state. And they're very transparent and clear about that. And if you think that this is some crazy conspiracy theory in the dark corners of the internet, you would be mistaken, because we have prominent Republican politicians who spew this nonsense garbage, and we have prominent cable show hosts like Tucker Carlson who do the same. We'll get to him later in the show. But first, a few more details about what happened during this shooting. There was one hero in that supermarket, a security, an ex-cop, and also a security guard who was armed. He tried to stop the shooter, but the shooter was wearing tactical gear and body armor. So it looked like a good person, good guy with a gun. Just wasn't enough to stop this heinous act of violence, extreme violence. So I wanna go to this next video that gives you more on what happened with the security guard. Let's watch.
Among those killed, 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield, described by her son as a mother to the motherless. Pearlie Young, age 77, who ran a food pantry for 25 years. And Aaron Salter Jr., a retired police officer and longtime supermarket security guard, called a hero for trying to take down the assailant. 10 of the 13 people shot were black.
This individual came here with the expressed purpose of taking as many black lives as he possibly could.
The suspect, Peyton Gendron, was arraigned hours after the shooting. He pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. Officials say the alleged gunman drove to Buffalo from his hometown 200 miles away and live streamed the attack online. Eyewitnesses say they watched him shoot 4 people outside the store, then continue the attack inside.
I heard at least 20 shots in store.
He then put a gun to his neck, but officials say police officers convinced him to drop it.
Police officers convinced him to drop it, which, good. I would much rather him see his day in court than have the cops do extrajudicial killings. But notice the difference between how cops tend to treat white mass shooters versus unarmed black individuals around the country. But that's beside the point, I guess. I just wanted to honor Aaron Salter for having the courage to try to save people's lives and defend people's lives as this mass shooter was carrying out this terrible crime, this terrible act. He was using a Bushmaster XM15 rifle. He purchased it legally, the shooter did. The shooter purchased it legally. But he made illegal modifications to the weapon so it would have a high capacity magazine capability. I should also note that he legally purchased that gun after his school had called state troopers on him because he had threatened to do a murder-suicide. This was a year prior to the shooting. So authorities apparently showed up to the scene. He went through mental evaluations. Eventually, they left it alone. Didn't think he posed any type of threat. And as you can imagine, soon after that, within a year, he bought the weapon that he would then use in this mass shooting. And he also posted his manifesto online a few days prior to carrying out this mass shooting. And it really makes you wonder, do we have anyone looking into these issues? I mean, you hear about all this indiscriminate spying into American people who haven't done anything wrong. There are all these giant red flags, Cenk, including the school calling the cops on him because he was threatening a murder-suicide. But he's able to legally purchase a gun. He's able to post his disgusting racist manifesto where he justifies killing children as well, by the way. No one notices it, no one cares. Like, is the FBI not on these message boards, whether it's 4chan or Reddit? Like, what are they doing?
No, but let's be very clear about this. Nobody else will talk about this because they find it deeply impolite, against their business interests, etc., to criticize the right wing in factual ways. The right wing protected this shooter in every possible way before the shooting. So in other countries, when they find out that this guy had already been talked to by the police about how he had publicly announced that he was going to murder people, and then we allowed him to buy any kind of weapons he wants, they won't believe it. They can't believe it. What kind of a government doesn't protect its own citizens? What you have to understand is our right wing here in America celebrates this kind of stuff. So they're like, you cannot touch his weapons. Even if he says he's going to murder you, you cannot touch his weapons. His weapons in America are holy. Your children, your family members are not. They're not at all important. Their lives are not at all important to the right wing at all. But that weapon, they pray to it. So we literally could not stop that guy from buying a weapon because of the right wing. And that's a fact, and everybody knows that. In fact, the right wing celebrates that. In fact, they'll watch this video and go, can you believe these guys are using this as an excuse just because those weapons are used to do massacre after massacre after massacre, a lot of which are purposely racial. There's a lot more where this came from, El Paso, Texas, let alone in other countries like Christchurch, New Zealand, let alone the shooting at the temple in Pittsburgh in 2018, which was also about the great replacement theory. The right wing goes, hey, that's our freedom. Well, how about those people at the temple? Did they have freedom to live? How about those people in Buffalo that died? The 11 people that were shot at, 13 people that were shot at, 10 that died. Did they have freedom? No, according to the right wing, they have no freedom at all. Only the weapons does. But it's not just the weapons. When he publishes a manifesto that Anna talked about, couple of days before the shooting, online, there's nothing we can do. The right wing says, freedom of speech, freedom to murder your children and talk about it and brag about it. And you are not allowed to touch that poor angel. Guys, if the authorities in America tried to stop that shooter the day before he did the shooting, the right wing would howl in this country and they would declare him a freedom of speech martyr, poor man in Buffalo, just because he wanted to murder black babies. They're taking his freedom of speech away, they're taking his guns away. Outrageous, they would say. So that is why we have nonstop massacres and ones that are deeply racial in this country, because the right wing protects them.
The right wing protects them, and I do think that there needs to be a real discussion in regard to how the media should cover these stories, because I think that most media, with the exception of like extreme right-wing outlets, they have the best intentions in that they do their best to kind of like hide the manifesto, to hide, but when you do that, it opens up an opportunity for the right-wingers who want to provide cover to do just that. And basically push out all these narratives that kind of muck up what the real motives were. And there is no mistaking what his motives were. He made sure that he was very clear in his manifesto, specifically mentioned that he does not have a mental illness, specifically talked about how he thinks that the replacement of white people in America is orchestrated by Jewish people. So it was anti-Semitic, it was anti-black, and it was full of paranoia and just a lot of, honestly, the garbage that we hear from Tucker Carlson during his primetime Fox News show. And so I want to get to the manifesto now, because I think it's worth talking about it so everyone's clear about what the motives were. So when you come across Glenn Greenwald, you know exactly what he's doing in trying to provide cover for white supremacists who just murdered 10 people and injured 3 others in this mass shooting.
I just want to say 2 last things before you go to that. One is, no, the thing that you mentioned is an aside, that he's still alive. The cops didn't shoot him. A lot of our members are writing in, and I totally agree with them. We just showed a story of a Latina grandmother, 75 years old, who has dementia. Her family called in the cops, and the cops came in. She's away from them, might or might not have a knife, and they just shot her dead because she would pose a threat. Latinas, black people, no matter how young they are, 12-year-old Tamir Rice, no matter how old they are, 75-year-old Latina that we covered the other day, they get shot, and almost always instantly. But you go murder 10 people, oh, it's a black part of town and a white guy did it. Whoa, let's be super gentle and wrap him in bubble wrap. I don't think they should have shot him. But can you also please stop shooting black people if you're cops? How about trying to protect all of us? I know you've sworn to the right wing that you will never protect us from their guns and from their hatred. Can you then stop murdering our citizens along the way? So which leads me to the last point. Roberta Drury was one of the victims here, and she was not from Buffalo. She came in from out of town because her brother was getting a bone marrow transplant. And she went to Tops to cook a special dinner that night for her brother and her family. And she was murdered that day. And I want you to keep her in mind, as you will now see for weeks on end, the right wing beginning to defend not necessarily the killer, although sometimes they will, but his rights to do the things that he did. His right to be racist, his right to say over the top horrible things about other races, his right to be concerned about being replaced, his right to have those deadly weapons so he can kill lots of black people at the same time, and yes, Jews too. They always come back to, oh, it's the Jews that are spearheading the replacement of white people in America. And remember that deep anti-Semitism and remember that hatred as you see that right wing go to protect him now after the fact.
All right, let's get to his manifesto and what it said. The Buffalo shooter who shot and killed 10 individuals in a supermarket in Buffalo, all of them African Americans, and he also injured 3 others. He left a manifesto that made it clear that he intended to drive 200 miles away from the town that he lives in order to carry out this violent act. And he made it clear that he's doing it because he believes that minorities and black people are here to replace white people like him, and he needs to do something about it. And so there's a lot that you might see online with right-wingers trying to provide cover for this guy, but I wanna make sure you don't fall victim to their disinformation, because I read all 180 pages of his manifesto, and I wanna share some of the excerpts from it. I thought this part was telling. He wrote, quote, "I started browsing 4chan in May of 2020 after extreme boredom. Remember, this was during the outbreak of COVID. There, I learned through infographics and memes that the white race is dying out and that the Jews and the elite were behind this." Okay, so let's pause for a second. You can find, it's archived, but you can find his social media posts prior to getting radicalized by these message boards online. And he was, by all counts, a normal guy, a normal kid, okay? Took COVID seriously. In one reply on Twitter, he asked someone like, why would you even risk someone else's life by not following the guidelines? I'm paraphrasing, but he's essentially saying stuff like that. I give you those details because it shows you just how quickly a seemingly normal individual can be rapidly radicalized by these platforms, by these message boards, places like 4chan. But let me give you more details on what he said his intentions were. He did this portion of the manifesto where he answers questions that people might have about his motives and why he carried out this violent act. Why did you decide to carry out the attack? I carried out the attack to show to the replacers that as long as the white man lives, our land will never be theirs and they will never be safe from us. To directly reduce immigration rates to European lands by intimidating and physically removing the replacers themselves, to intimidate the replacers already living on our lands to emigrate back to their home countries. Let me read one more graphic. He also says his intentions are to agitate the political enemies of my people into action, to cause them to overextend their own hand and experience the eventual and inevitable backlash as a result, to incite violence, retaliation, and further divide between the European people and the replacers currently occupying European soil. Let's just note how, the guy, he mentions Native Americans briefly in the manifesto, but his argument is, yeah, but white people have been here for a long time. And so as a result, this is a white country. This belongs to us. So totally excusing what white settlers did in America, the brutality, the barbarism toward Native Americans, not a big deal, right? It's okay when we're the replacers. And we've been here for so long that this is our land. That's the kind of mentality he had, and it's the garbage that he reads on these message boards.
Yeah, so for guys, the scariest part of this is now nearly half of Republican voters say that they believe in great replacement theory.
Yep.
So it's some strongly believe in it, others somewhat believe in it. The Jews are somewhat replacing us with Latinos and blacks, goes the theory, right? By the way, I say the Jews because not only did he talk about it in his manifesto over and over, it is a connecting theme in all of these shooters. So the Pittsburgh shooter that shot up a synagogue also talked about how the Jews were replacing white people in the country. And this goes all the way back, of course, to the Nazis who chanted, "The Jews will not replace us." Yes, that's the chant that they then chanted in Charlottesville, the Nazi right wing here in America. And so it all connects, and it is all connected to the great replacement theory. That is, and in fact, this particular shooter in Buffalo explained in his manifesto, he said that almost the same exact thing that the shooter in Christchurch, New Zealand did. Remember that mass shooting where he killed dozens of Muslims? He blamed the puppet master as being Angela Merkel, at the time the leader of Germany. This guy took out Merkel and put in George Soros. Same exact words except for Soros, the Jewish puppet master that is looking to replace us. One of the questions that I have is, replace us for what? Like nobody ever talks about that. And a lot of Republicans, because now tons of Republicans, including the number 3 Republican in the House, at least Stefanik, are defending the replacement theory. But what are you guys worried is going to be replaced? So if you said to me, somebody's gonna replace you, I'd say, where? To do what, right?
Well,
the assumption is they're gonna replace us in having power in this country.
Yes.
And so, Anna, I just want to point out the super obvious, because right-wing media will defend the replacement theory and mainstream media will go, I can't tell anything, I don't know anything about news, I'll call it 50-50. They'll be outraged at this, right? But when you say it's obviously racist, the great replacement theory, a lot of them will get skittish because now nearly half of Republicans believe it, right? And guys, if you say only white people should hold power, and oh my God, the Latinos or the black people or Jews, etc., are going to replace us in having power, that is by definition racist.
But do you know why they think that that's a bad thing, other than they believe that they would lose power? They're concerned that once they're the minority, in terms of numbers, obviously, well then people of color are gonna be as vicious to us as we've been to them.
Yeah, 100%, Anna, and we've talked about that on the show before, but I wanna make a very important clarification. It's projection, because left-wing white people don't think, oh my God, what if a Latino were to replace me in power? They don't think that at all. They think, well, what difference does it make? Okay, I was a councilman and now that black lady over there is a councilman. What difference does it make, right? But because they actually believe in equality. But white right-wingers, they think, no, I love oppressing you, and I assume that having power means I get to oppress you and you can't do a goddamn thing about it, and I love acting superior to you. And so they assume that when minorities get the power, that they're going to do the same to them. Well, good news for you, evil right-wingers. We're not anywhere near as evil as you guys. In fact, we're not at all evil. In fact, we want you to be equal to everyone else. But I know that's the thing that bothers you the most. That's the whole point of great replacement theory. They don't want to be equal.
A few more things I want to mention from his manifesto before we wrap this up. He also, in the Q&A portion of his manifesto, asks, was the attack anti-immigration in origin? And he says, yes, beyond all doubt, anti-immigration, anti-ethnic replacement, and anti-cultural replacement. By the way, if I recall correctly, the right wing loves to talk about how black people are allegedly culturally violent. It's an interesting accusation to make when most of the mass shooters in this country have been young white males. Now, do I think that this is a cultural characteristic of white people in America? No, I don't think that. But I do think that it's fascinating that we see projection among right wingers in like every facet of life, whether it has to do with sexual identity, whether it has to do with projections on violence. It's just, you see it happen and play out over and over again. He also justifies, by the way, killing children. I want to go to the last graphic here because it gives you an idea of how depraved and disgusting this person is. Children of replacers, because he asks, is it okay to kill children? Like, why are we killing children? You know, they're innocent. He says, children of replacers do not stay children. They become adults and reproduce, creating more replacers to replace your people. They grow up and vote against your people's own wishes for the interests of their own people and identity. They grow up and take the potential homes of your people for themselves. They occupy positions of power, remove wealth, and destroy social trust. Just an unbelievable way of thinking. And look, I think all of what we're experiencing politically in the country right now is intertwined, because which political group is taking freedom and liberty away from women by not allowing them to make medical decisions about their own bodies? It's the right wing, which, as Cenk mentioned earlier, is now dominated by this ideology where you have more than half of Republican voters believing in this nonsense conspiracy theory of white replacement. And so I think that the plan here is to purge the country, in their minds. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion, but in their minds, purge the country of anyone who's not white, and then basically force white women to reproduce, right? To bulk up the numbers of white people in America.
Yeah, and have white men be completely in charge, like they would say, the good old days when we had slaves and women couldn't vote and they were chattel to be used in our households, and no other minority had rights at all, and we would bar people like Asians. It goes on and on. And so look, does white culture in America have a problem with violence? No, I think that's too broad. Problem with racism, obviously this country has a problem with racism overall. But if you get more specific and ideological and not base it on race, does the right wing in this country have a history of racism? Well, not just a history, right now, there's no question about it. They celebrate racism all the time, all the time. Their whole cry about freedom of speech, we have disproven it hundreds of times on this show. They do not want to protect any other speech other than racist speech. And do they have a history? Do they have a culture in the right wing in this country of violence? Hell yeah, they do. They overwhelming celebration of violence. And now 40% of Republicans say that it might be time for political violence. Hey, 40% of Republicans, congratulations. You got the violence you were looking for. Are you happy now?
I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah.
They've been craving a race war, and like I have no doubt in my mind that there are right wingers in this country who saw that mass shooting and thought this is exactly what needs to happen. Because, and by the way, let's just be clear about one other thing. This is not a lone wolf. Okay, let's stop pretending like, oh, this is a one-off. No, we don't have a problem in the country. We absolutely do have a problem. This isn't just something that permeates or exists in the dark corners of the internet. This is something that has become mainstream, this ideology, through programming over at Fox News, through the campaigning that we see from Elise Stefanik, Republican lawmaker from New York, Matt Gaetz. We'll provide all those receipts on the show in a little bit. But this is a problem. It is an identity. It's part of America's identity. It's part of our history. When you really look at the prevalence of right-wing extremism in America, the violence against people of color in America, we gotta be real about that. And we gotta be real about how people are getting radicalized and have a real conversation about how to mitigate that. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep running around in the same circle over and over and over again. And I'm afraid that that's exactly what's gonna happen in the aftermath of this tragic event. All right, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, Glenn Greenwald, of course, jumping in, connecting back to his roots of defending Nazis to defend this guy. We've got this story and more when we come back.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Let's keep going. Unfortunately, there's a lot of news here.
Tucker Carlson has many apologists, and unfortunately, Glenn Greenwald, who's a regular on his program, happens to be one of them. Now, the Buffalo shooter who gunned down 10 innocent individuals and injured 3 others at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, believed in white replacement theory, the idea that people of color and immigrants are coming into the country and having a lot of kids to replace white people. And one of the individuals who spews that garbage on his show on a regular basis is Tucker Carlson. Now, to run interference for Tucker Carlson is Glenn Greenwald with this statement. There are fundamental and glaring differences between the animating views of the New Zealand and Buffalo shooters and Fox hosts. But even if there weren't, exploiting corpses as they still lie on the ground for mob justice is ghoulish, soulless, and sick, he argues.
You're ghoulish, soulless, and sick.
100%.
You want to distract from people, Glenn, when they're actually mad and want to do something about it. Say, oh, let's come back to it 2 days or 2 weeks later. Full well knowing, Glenn, that they're not going to come back to it. And your mission is going to be accomplished, which is shh.
Exactly.
Racist white right-wing culture is awesome, right, Glenn? Freedom of speech, go get him, big guy. That's what your goddamn thing. And that's why you say, oh, no, when we're guilty, shush, 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 shush. And all of a sudden he brings back a shooter, the one shooter from the left, and talks about it for page after page after page. Because remember, the dozens of right-wing murderers in the country that are mass shooters, the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, El Paso, Texas, when they shot Latinos, almost all about the great replacement theory. But shh, Glenn doesn't want you talking about that. Talk about the one left-wing shooter. Distraction, squirrel. I gotta protect my beloved Tucker Carlson. That's how I make money. You're pathetic, Glenn, pathetic.
He's just, Cenk, he's just going back to his roots of defending Nazis. Which is exactly what he did as a lawyer for Matthew Hale, a Nazi. That's what he does. And he had a brief moment of clarity in his life. Maybe he decided, let me go toward wanting to protect people's civil liberties through the reporting I do. But that wasn't really who he was, right? He decided to go right back into the defending Nazis category with his work. Now, I want to read you also from his Substack, but before I do, I want to also note the very first thing Glenn Greenwald did on Twitter after the shooting happened was go after the New York Times because they made a small error in regard to the shooter liking crypto. Turns out the shooter didn't like crypto. He was actually very critical of crypto. Who cares? Who cares? It is such an obvious squirrel meant to distract you. And then later he comes out with this Substack piece where he writes that Carlson was primarily responsible for the 10 dead people in Buffalo was asserted despite the fact that there was no indication that the shooter even knew who Carlson was, that he had ever watched his show, that he was influenced by him in any way, or that he admired or even liked the Fox host. Indeed, in the long list of people and places which Gendron, that's the shooter, cited as important influences on him, Brenton Tarrant, the El Paso shooter, Patrick Crusius, the California Jewish Community Center killer, John Ernest, the Norwegian mass murderer, Anders Breivik, the Charleston, no, that's wrong.
No, it's not wrong. Charleston Black Church murderer, Dylan Roof, etc.
Right. Yeah, so he names all these other people who were named, by the way, in the shooter's manifesto. Anyway, but look, the point here is Tucker Carlson has taken white replacement theory, which primarily existed in the dark corners of the internet, and he brought it mainstream, took it mainstream with his primetime news show on Fox. He knows that, but he wants to provide cover for him. And so I don't know, maybe Glenn Greenwald is really dumb, or maybe he's super unaware of what Tucker Carlson talks about on his show on a regular basis. So let's remind him. Let's take a look at this video.
I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. But they become hysterical because that's what's happening, actually. Let's just say it, that's true. We've never seen demographic change like this. It's roughly the equivalent of a brand new city of Chicago every year. A city populated entirely by poor people with limited education who can't speak English. And the question is, how is it good for America? Where exactly is all this criminal white supremacy, this right-wing domestic terrorism that poses, quote, the most lethal terrorist threat in the homeland? Where is it? Well, of course, it doesn't exist. In other words, you're being replaced and there's nothing you can do about it. So shut up. The great replacement theory, it's a lie, they yelled. George Soros has nothing to do with that. Stop talking. They said we were espousing something called the great replacement theory, a well-known racist fantasy, the great replacement. They acknowledge that it's real and they love it. This policy is called the great replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries. The great replacement plan is working.
But Cenk, the shooter didn't mention Tucker Carlson by name in his manifesto, therefore innocent, totally innocent.
No reasonable human being that was objective would look at what Tucker Carlson has said, read the 180-page manifesto, and come back and say, the number one problem is New York Times had a typo and there was a left-wing shooter 5 years ago. No, but wait, why are we talking about that? This guy just did the shooting today. You say we shouldn't talk about the shooting that happened today, but we should talk about a shooting that happened 5 years ago and some tiny little error of the New York Times. Glenn, it's super obvious to anyone with 2 brain cells that you're trying to distract people. Then the question is, why? Why are you trying to distract them from Tucker Carlson constantly talking about the great replacement theory? Listen to the things that Tucker Carlson said in just that clip. He talked about how these nefarious forces, including George Soros, want to replace Americans with, quote, more obedient voters from the third world. Why would they be more obedient? More obedient to who? What would be the problem with whether it's an immigrant from the Scandinavian countries or the Baltic countries or the African countries or the Asian countries coming here? And if we're all equal and you believe in the most core principle of America, of equality, you would think, who cares if an Asian guy is voting or a Latina lady or a white guy? What difference does it make? But apparently it makes a big, big difference to Tucker Carlson. That's why he keeps talking about it. And in 1965, there was a law that was repealed, and that law said that only people basically from Europe could immigrate here. And Tucker Carlson said that was the worst thing that ever happened. Glenn, why was it the worst thing that ever happened where we allowed people from other countries that are non-white to immigrate here? That's what Tucker Carlson says.
He referred to it as the worst attack on the country in 160 years, and he was specifically referring to an act that was meant to replace the national origin formula. The national origin formula limited immigration into the United States to white people and white people only. And when that was changed through a later act, that is what Tucker Carlson refers to as the worst attack on the country in 60 years.
No, but that is deeply and obviously and blatantly racist. Okay. To say, oh my God, we're gonna allow immigration from non-white people? We're gonna allow that? That is an attack on America, because they do not view America as black people or Latinos or Jews or Muslims. They view America as white. That is the definition of racism. Tucker Carlson said it endless times on his show. And the shooters in El Paso and all the other places that Glenn himself even quoted, all talk about the replacement theory, or almost all talk about it. And in almost the same ways that Tucker Carlson talks about it. But somehow Glenn thinks objectively, oh, I can't see it. I can only see things that happened 5 years ago and from people that I disagree with politically. But when it's my main benefactor, then I can't see, I'm blind. And the reason we get more upset at Glenn is because he's not an idiot. And what makes it sad is how deeply morally odious he is. He's a corrupt, despicable person. And so, look, he talks about, the shooter does, and you saw it in that Tucker Carlson clip, about how Soros is leading the replacement of people. Soros is Jewish. It is a deeply anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. Glenn is Jewish, but he doesn't care. He's a fame whore. On Matt Hale that Anna talked about, the original Nazi that Glenn made his name defending, he was not a court-appointed lawyer. The original lawyer for Matt Hale was another fame whore, Alan Dershowitz. It was like, oh, it'll seem really interesting and different, and I'll make all the papers if I'm a Jewish lawyer defending a Nazi.
But Dershowitz was too expensive for Matthew Hale, so he had to find like a low-rent lawyer.
Yeah, and low-rent lawyer Glenn Greenwald then jumped in and said, I'd like to be famous. I'd like to be famous. I'll defend the Nazi. Glenn, you're right back at it. Congratulations.
And finally, one more piece of evidence for Glenn or anyone who's been duped by Glenn. Why don't we hear from a proudly self-described white nationalist and what he thinks about Tucker Carlson and his rhetoric on his show? Let's watch.
When Tucker says population replacement is a voting rights issue, there are young people that go, yep, yes, that's so true, it is. Right before I went live on my show, I watched a clip from Tucker Carlson's show. And I noticed that Tucker Carlson was saying the exact same thing that I said last night. And that's okay. And in the spirit of America first, and we've got to get used to saying this, I saw that monologue and I said, okay. So, my talking points, I guess, are now mainstream enough that they're on Fox News.
Mainstream enough that they're now on Fox News. And that's exactly what Tucker Carlson has managed to do, along with Republican politicians like Elise Stefanik and also Matt Gaetz.
To this day, I believe that Glenn Greenwald is still pretending to be a progressive.
Yeah.
And by the way, the morons, the blithering idiots of the right wing are like, oh no, it's true. Oh, progressives are always defending white supremacists like Tucker Carlson, talking about how these dirty immigrants are gonna replace us beloved pure white people. That's what progressives do, right? No progressive does that. He's a total whore for the right wing. He makes money from you guys, and he's like, yes, money from the right wing. No. I don't see great replacement theory. Tucker's only said it a couple dozen times. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. All these shooters are all talking about the same exact theory. I don't see it. Oh, really, Glenn, you can't see it? No, the most disgusting part is that it's obvious that you do see it, and you're trying to trick everyone else into pretending that someone on the left wing sees, oh, you poor right wingers, your culture of violence is so beautiful. Your culture of racism is gorgeous. Oh, you're the victims. You're the poor victims. Look at the New York Times. They got a slight fact wrong. It's their fault, not your fault. Guys, this is just the beginning. They're gonna go on a warpath over the next couple of weeks. They're gonna let this cool down for a couple of days. And then they're gonna say the Democrats are overreacting. In fact, he wrote it in the manifesto, the 18-year-old kid did, okay? He said it's gonna be great because we're gonna say that the Democrats are overreacting, and then we'll do even more pushback in our direction, and we'll get even more power. He wrote it in the manifesto, and you will see it play out on Fox News on a nightly basis. When we say, hey, can we, at least for God's sake, track people who say, I am going to murder people, can we at least have police talk to them? And they're gonna say, oh my God, we're the victims. We're the victims just because we want to murder minorities, just because we want to murder people that aren't the same race or ideology as us. We're being tracked, we're the victims. No, those dead people are the victims. And you guys are at fault. Oh, you don't like that, Glenn? Cry, I don't care, go make your money. Piece of crap, go dance for them.
Yeah, he will, he loves dancing for them. He's got a long history of dancing for them, it's garbage. Anyway, we gotta take a quick break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including what elected lawmakers have to say about the shooting. We'll be right back.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Arizona State Senator Wendy Rogers, a member of the Oath Keepers who also appeared in Nick Fuentes' white nationalist America First PAC conference, has pushed a conspiracy in regard to the Buffalo shooting. The shooter in that case was fueled by racism and a belief in white replacement theory. So he showed up to a predominantly black neighborhood and shot and killed 10 black individuals and also injured 3 others in this mass shooting. Now, what did Wendy Rogers, a white nationalist herself, have to say about it? Well, she posted on social media, Fed Boy Summer has started in Buffalo, taking a page out of Alex Jones's book to push this theory that it was a false flag. She's an elected lawmaker in the state of Arizona. She is a state senator in Arizona. And if you think she's the only unhinged right-wing lawmaker in the country, you'd be mistaken, because on a federal level, we have others who are just openly pushing the racist white replacement theory. And we'll get to them in just a second. Cenk.
Yeah, she's also deeply anti-Semitic, and so is the Great Replacement Theory. She has posted several anti-Semitic memes before, including when they were attacking CPAC, which is a massively right-wing organization, but they think it's not racist and right-wing enough, and so in it they put a Star of David on it. She's talking about George Soros, like Tucker Carlson does, like the shooter in Buffalo did. Oh, the guy who's actually controlling things and looking to replace us. And then has all these conspiracies because he's the puppet master. It is the oldest, libel there is, and it's directed at the so-called Jews who control us. She's deeply anti-Semitic, deeply racist. And by the way, if she's reelected, so is all of her constituents. Not all, but the ones that voted for her are saying, yes, I like this anti-Semitism. I like a lunatic representing me because I'm just as stupid and crazy as she is. And by the way, if you look at the polling on the Republican side, it's a giant chunk of them. We'll talk about that in a second, because it's what's driving these politicians Anna's about to tell you about.
So she has in the past retweeted a push to celebrate Confederate generals on MLK Day.
On MLK Day?
Yep, on MLK Day.
Racist. I was gonna add
I hear you.
Else.
Like, honestly, what has become the most challenging part of doing this show, aside from the subject matter, which is deeply depressing, is not being able to curse in response to the subject matter. Now, just to give you another example of how extreme she is, here is another post of hers where she writes, OAN is the best, but is being banned. Newsmax is now Fox News. Fox News is now CNN. CNN is now MSNBC. MSNBC is now Soviet Central Television.
They're so corporate, that's hilarious.
They are getting worse, she argued. She's just like worms for brains, insanely hateful person. In fact, all these outlets that are hateful on their own aren't hateful enough for her. But I want to go to other elected lawmakers here, because this is a huge problem that we're starting to see with mainstream Republican lawmakers, including Elise Stefanik from New York. So she has pushed the white replacement theory, not by name. She uses the same language in some of her political ads. A series of Facebook ads published in September of 2021 by Stefanik's campaign committee charged that Democrats were allowing undocumented immigrants into the United States as a ploy to outnumber and eventually silence Republican voters.
Hey, racist, why don't you try to get Latino votes? What would be wrong with that? Why is a Latino vote any less than a white vote? Racist, Stefanik, you racist piece of crap. What are they replacing? What difference would it make if you were serving all of your voters? But you're saying, oh, no. If we have more Latinos or any other blacks or any other group, they would be replacing us. Who's us, Elise? Who's us? White people, you racist. Oh, are you gonna cry because I called you racist? You're not gonna cry about the 10 people massacred the other day. But I guarantee you, when we accurately show you how racist you are, then you're gonna say, oh, I'm the victim. No, by the way, Elise Stefanik was a very corporate, normal Republican.
Yep.
She became the #3 Republican when she raised her hand and said, I'll hate immigrants. I'll be as racist as any of you. And they said, congratulations, Elise. You're now promoted to #3 in the Republican Party in the House.
Yeah, and she referred to immigrants coming into the country as a permanent election insurrection.
Why would it be an insurrection? Why don't you get their votes? Why wouldn't Republican ideology be deeply appealing to new immigrants? Pull yourself up from the bootstraps, work really hard. I mean, that seems like classic Republican, if you believe it, mythology and classic immigrant way of thinking. Oh, they're not right for you guys because they're not white. That is the only reason. And you're saying, I'm not saying it, you're saying I don't want the immigrant votes. They're gonna replace us good white people. They're okay. Anyone debating whether the Republicans are racist is either a total and utter fool or is lying to you on purpose.
And Matt Gaetz, he's one of the more dopier right-wing politicians, and he did use the words. This was in 2021 specifically to defend Tucker Carlson, who spews white replacement theory garbage on his show on a regular basis. Matt Gaetz defended him by saying Tucker Carlson is correct about replacement theory as he explains what is happening to America. The Anti-Defamation League is a racist organization, he argues.
Yeah, so ADL is fights against anti-Semitism, and they are trying to protect Jewish Americans from fascists. And the fascists are deeply bothered by it. And they say, no, it's the Jewish organization that's racist. It's us good white people who don't want to be replaced by immigrants brought in by Jews. We're not the racists, we're not the anti-Semites. Yeah, sure, if you say so. I'm not debating it anymore. 40% of Republicans say it might be time for violence, and boom, there's violence. Nearly 50% of Republicans say that they believe in the replacement theory. They either strongly believe in it or somewhat agree with it, okay? Nearly half of Republicans think that this deeply anti-Semitic, deeply racist theory is just A-okay. Well, we don't want white people being replaced in power. White people should always be in power. And then they will genuinely turn around and go, I'm not racist. You guys are a joke. Anyone who stays a Republican and says, oh, half my party is filled with racist people. Oh, no problem. And this, at least Stefanik's #3 in the House, no problem. Tucker Carlson, #1 show for right wingers, no problem. If you say that's not a problem, and all the horrible things that Donald Trump has said, calling Mexicans rapists and criminals, saying we should ban all Muslims, saying he can't tell who was right in the Charlottesville case. Good people on both sides, on the Nazi and the non-Nazi side. If you still are a Republican, you love that racism. Just admit it. Be honest for the first time in your life. All Republicans are bastards.
And finally, just a few other lawmakers. There's Representative Scott Perry. He's the current chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus. He said during a subcommittee hearing examining migration from Central America last year that many Americans believe were replacing national-born American, native-born Americans to permanently transform the political landscape of this very nation. Look, it's racism, there's no question about it, but it's about power and the fear of losing power and the fear of what happens to racist white people in the country once they do lose power. They're worried about reaping what they sow.
As we've said 100 times, don't worry, you idiots. We're not evil like you. You people are evil and immoral. And you don't believe in equality, and you don't believe in justice. And all you ever want to do is keep everyone else down under your thumb because you get off on it. That's what sick, evil, immoral people like Republicans do. We on the left have no plan on doing that. Unlike you treasonous people, yes, partly based on January 6th, partly based on the fact that you hate democracy, but mainly based on the fact that you avowedly say you don't want equality, you want only white people to be in charge. Don't worry, we're not monsters like you. We actually believe in equality. Under no circumstances would we ever allow discrimination against white people, because that would be against our core principles, because we're actually Americans. You, on the other hand, you've always been on the side of the Confederacy, Republicans. You've always hated this country and its founding principles. The only thing you liked was the racism that existed before, and you're desperately trying to hold on to that. Don't replace us, we want to be the ones in power. We love being racist right-wingers in power, don't replace our power. I hope to God that we replace your power, because it has been used for sick, immoral, and evil purposes the entire history of the nation, including today. Get rid of all Republicans, they're all bastards.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back for the second hour, we'll switch gears a little bit, talk about the ongoing war on women and their bodies. And I promise later in the show, we will have fun, including, I can't help it, we gotta dunk on Jordan Peterson a little bit, okay? Kermit the Frog, not too happy with a woman with a robust, beautiful body. So we've got that story and more, stick around.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.